Alright, let's move on. We're almost done. Number 18. Write the equation in vertex form. Well, we got to know what vertex form is first of all. So let's write that down. So it's going to be y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And remember, this is going to be a parabola. The a just depends. It tells you how much it's going to stretch, whether it's going to go steeper or wider. This tells you if it's moving left or right. If it's negative, it moves it to the right. If it's positive, it moves it to the left. And this tells you how many places you're going to move it up or down. So we're going to take this and change it to look like this because it's a lot easier to graph in vertex form than it is in this original form right here. So let's go ahead and work on that. Let's write down the equation. Y equals 2x squared minus 12x plus 25. What we're going to do is we're going to use completing the square in order to make it look like this, because this looks like a perfect square. In fact, it is. It's exactly a perfect square. You have a parentheses and a squared on the outside, so that's what we want it to look like. So first thing we're going to do, see there's an A right out in front? This is a greatest common factor with something inside of this parentheses. If you look at this, 2 is in common with both of these things right here. So I'm going to factor out a 2. Let's see what I get. X squared minus 6. Actually, you know what? There's more than just that. I lied. Let's just keep it like this. So we factor out a 2. What do we get? We get x squared. So we're looking 2. Let me do that. Okay, x squared minus 6x. I'm going to leave a little space right here because I want to complete the square. Remember what we have to do to that middle term to complete the square. It's 25. 2 doesn't go into the 25 evenly, so I'm just going to put that 25 way out here on the end. We'll play around with that in a little bit. And that's going to have something to do with the k. So let's figure out what's going to go in the spot. Remember what we do. We take half the middle term and we square it. So if we take half of this, it's 3. We square it, we get a 9. And remember before, whatever did to one side, do to the other side, but we're not doing it to both sides this time. We're keeping it on the same side because over here is y. I just want that to stay y. I don't want to move anything over here. I'm going to keep it on the same side. But in order to do that, if I added a 9, but you look at it, it's really not a 9, is it? Because look, it's being multiplied by this 2. So technically what we did is not really add a 9 to this side. We really added an 18. 2 times 9 is 18. So if I can't just arbitrarily just add an 18 to that side. So what I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to subtract an 18. So really, in effect, I really didn't do anything. I added an 18, I subtracted an 18. That's basically just like adding a 0. So the value of this is exactly the same as what we started with. It just looks different. And why do we go through all that stuff? Because we wanted to put it into this form. Y equals 2. Now this is a perfect square. So now I can write it as a perfect square. It's just going to be x minus 3. And then you just work that out. What is that? 7 plus 7. And there you go. Now it's in vertex form. Now this looks like it's supposed to. Okay, number 19. We're going to graph this time. But before we graph, we need to set it up. We need to make it into that vertex form like we did earlier. And we're going to do that by completing the square, so then it's a lot easier to graph that way. So let's write it out. I'm going to write out the whole thing. Oops. Minus 4x minus 2. Alright. I'm going to keep this over here. I'm not changing the y. I'm not changing this. I'm just messing with this stuff, changing it into vertex form. First of all, let's find the greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out a negative 2. Now, if I do that, I'm only going to take it out of the first 2 because I'm going to put this over here on the end, even though 2 does go into this. I don't know, I'm just going to be more consistent and just do it this way every time. So if I factor out a negative 2, I've got x squared. Factor a negative 2 from this, I get a positive 2x. I'll leave a spot for that term when I take half of it and square it. I'm just going to stick the minus 2 out here on the end. So let's do this now. Let's take half of the middle term. Half of 2 is 1, squared is 1, positive 1. So let's put it right there. Now it is a 1 inside the parentheses, but altogether on this right side, it's technically not a 1. What is it? It's a 1 times negative 2, which is negative 2. So really what I did is I put in another value of negative 2. Basically added a negative 2 or subtracted a 2 from this side. I can't just subtract a 2. I'm going to have to add a 2 as well, so that is balanced out. Look what happens when I add a 2 to this. It comes out to 0, so it works out kind of nice. So y is less than negative 2, parentheses, this is a perfect square now, so it's x plus 1. That's a 0. In fact, I'm going to put a 0 there. That might help us out a little bit. Now we have it in vertex form. Now we can go ahead and graph the thing. It's a lot easier to graph it in this form than it is this form right here. So let's set up a graph. Alright, I moved stuff out of the way just to make it a little bit more readable. Put up a nice little graph here. So let's see what's going on. First of all, this plus 1 means we're going to, it's a parabola, okay? And if you look at this, let's do this actually first. This means it's going to open down, so it's going to go down. And this means it's going to shift to the left, and it's not going to move up or down at all, alright? But this will face down, this will open down. And it's going to be a little steeper because of this 2 right here. So let's do that. Let's put the vertex in there. So instead of it 0, 0, this says we're going to move it to the left one place. So actually it's going to be right there. Let me change the colors of this. Alright, so that's where it's going to start, right there. Now, normally, if we didn't have that 2 there, let's say we had the negative, but we didn't have the 2, we would go over 1 and just down 1. But this time we're going to go over 1 and we're going to go down 1 times 2. That's why the 2's out there. So now it's going to go right here. Alright, and then, I should have put another number right there. So I went over 1 and down 2. Now I could also go over 2. Now normally because we're squaring, if we go down, or sorry, if we go over 2 and down 4 normally, but this time we're going to go 4 times 2. So we're going to go over 1, 2, and then we're going to go down all the way to 8, because 4 times 2 is 8. And that's going to be about right in here. See, it's a little bit steeper than it normally would be. Same thing over here. Symmetrical, so over 1 and down 1. And I should have put another line right there. That's at negative 3. So if I go over 2, I'm going to go down way down here to negative 8. And there it is. Now you know how I am about graphing this. Not so steady-handed, but you get the idea. That's not half bad. And there it is. Now it says y is less than this. So what are we talking about less than? We got to choose a point and see which one's going to work. Look, let's try 0, 0. 0 is obviously on the outside of this. Let's try 0, 0 and see if it makes this thing work. So 0 for the y and 0 for the x. Let's see what happens. I'm going to put a less than there. We'll kind of put a question mark. Is it less than or not? If it is less than, if 0 is less than whatever I put into here, then we shade on the outside. If it's not, we shade inside of here. So let's put a 0 in this. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. So is 0 less than negative 2? Yes, it is. So that means if 0, I'm sorry, yes it is. No, it's not. What am I talking about? This is a negative 2. So 0 is not less than negative 2. So we're not going to shade on the outside. Therefore, we shade in here like this. And that's where our shading goes. Alright, the last problem for chapter 5. So we're going to solve this, but it's an inequality. It kind of looks like what we've done before, except it's a greater than. So there's a little bit of a trick to this. So let's start it off like we normally would. Let's write it out. Negative x squared minus 2x plus 15 is greater than 0. First thing I'm going to do is factor out a negative from this. So I'm going to get an x squared plus 2x minus 15 is greater than 0. Look, let's get rid of this negative. Basically, it's a negative 1. How can I get rid of that? Dividing both sides, or you can even say multiply both sides by negative 1. So we get rid of this, but I got to multiply this by a negative 1. What happens to my inequality when I multiply or divide by a negative 1? It changes the direction. So it's going to look like this. Now instead of greater than, it's going to be less than 0. Right? So this is now where we're going to go from here. Now if you look at this, this just happens to factor real nice and easy. They won't always, but in this one, it does. So let's see what we got. 5 and 3 will work, right? Do the factoring, less than 0. And now remember what we do on this. First of all, we set up a little, we're going to do a little number line here, but before we do that, we're going to find out those points on the number line. So I'm going to take x plus 5 and actually set it equal to 0. I know it says less than, but we're going to actually set these things equal to 0. So x is equal to negative 5 and x is equal to positive 3. We're going to come over here, make a little number line, and just put a negative 5 right here and a 3 right here. You've got these 3 different sections that x has a possibility of being in between. The easiest one is to choose where the 0 would be. The 0 would be in between here. So let's try a 0. You could try it in the top one, or you could try it right here. Let's put it in this one right here. That'd be easy. Put in a 0 for this. So 0 squared is 0 plus 0, negative 15. Is negative 15 less than 0? Yeah, definitely. Negative is less than 0, so that means my points are all going to lie in between here. It just says less than, so it's open, and it's everything shaded in between. Shaded in between like that. Now it doesn't ask you really to graph it like this, but how do we write our answer? It's easy to look at this graph visually and decide how we write our answer. So it's going to be put an x in the middle, and then we put the negative 5 out here, put a 3 here, and that's our answer. And you can check. You can try any number in between negative 5 and 3. Put it into our original equation, and that will satisfy that inequality. I said equation, but it's an inequality. If you try a number that's bigger than 3 or less than negative 5 and try to put it in here, it won't work. All right, that's it for Chapter 5. Let's move on to the next one.